and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be doing a wrap up and talk through of all the books that I read in February. So as a little summary, I read 12 books in February and 4 of those were novellas, so they were like shorter, so do with that number what you will. I read 3 fantasy books, I read 5 fantasy, 6 romance, and 1 nonfiction, which is rare. I usually read like 1 nonfiction in an entire year, so that is mine done for the year pretty much. But yeah, let's get into it. I think I'm going to start with the fantasy books that I read. So I'm going to start out with Quicksilver by Callie Hart. This was one of my most anticipated reads for the year, and I actually did a reading vlog for it. So if you want to go see all my like in-depth thoughts while I was reading it, you can go watch that. So this is an adult fantasy romance. It's got fae in it. I would describe it as like a very sort of tropey fantasy romance book. Like it really hits the mark for like what makes a good romantasy, and I wouldn't say it's like original in any way, but like I loved it. Like it just hit like for all the things that I love in a romantasy book, and I had such a good time reading it. So in this book, we have our main character who is a human, and she's living in this like really quite poor area, and the kingdom like doesn't care about them, doesn't give them enough food or water or anything like that. And she sort of like steals to get by. She's like a very strong main character, which I love. And then she sort of somehow ends up finding herself in the fae world, where she meets a grumpy fae guy. And a lot more happens than that. There's like lots of political plot, lots of world building, really good romance, found family, like all the things that I enjoy in a good fantasy romance. Yeah, overall, I just really like this. I would definitely recommend. I've seen some like somewhat mixed reviews, but I thought it was really good, really fun. I would definitely recommend. I listened to the audiobook and it was very good because they had like different people for all the characters, or at least the main 2 characters. I don't know about every single one. But yeah, I would highly recommend. The next book that I have is Unhallowed Halls by Lily Wilkinson. And this is a dark academia fantasy young adult book. I haven't read much dark academia before, and I think when I have, I found it a bit hit or miss if I like it, but I think maybe because this was young adult, I did still like it. Like it wasn't too dark, I guess. But in this story, we are following our main character who starts at this new boarding school. It's meant to be for like really high achievers who are like super smart. And basically she starts there, and the whole boarding school is like very sort of unique and different. And there's something mysterious going on, and there's lots of like weird occurrences happening, and you slowly figure out what's going on along with her. I would say the first half of this book, I was just confused. I think that was kind of the point. Like everything that was happening, I was like, what is happening right now? Like that was so weird. What's going on? I'm truly confused. I feel like that was the point. But anyway, then we got to the second half and you sort of start to actually understand what's going on. And I was hooked. Like I could not put this book down. I found it so interesting. Yeah, overall, I really liked it and I would definitely recommend. Okay, and then the next book that I read, which was actually 3 novellas, but this is the like binder of it into one book. I will say I don't love the cover. I'm sorry to say, I don't really want to see shirtless men on the cover. But apart from that, this is the Wrath of the Fae trilogy by Alessa Thorne. So it's a binder of 3 books. They're each about like 160, 70 pages. So like they're each sort of short novellas. And I listened to the audio for each of them, and they were like 6-ish hours each. The first one is Kiss of the Blood Prince. The second is Heart of the Winter Prince. And the third is Wings of the Night Prince. So in this series, it follows the same world across like each book takes place in like a different time, and each book follows a different couple. And each couple is like a fated mates type of thing between one of the fae and one of the humans. And the premise sort of set up in the first book is set in our world, and all of a sudden they get sort of like invaded by the fae, and there's like a backstory as to why, and they like come in and they're like killing everybody and like trying to sort of take over, and you learn what's going on with them. And then one of the Fae and our main character in the first one meet, and romance happens, and there's like a sort of political plot going on in the background, but it's not super heavy on that. Each book is following like a different sort of fantasy plot line, but I would say the romance is probably like the main plot line in all of them. Like the romance is quite heavy. I will also say, for how short each book is, there is quite a lot of spice packed into that. But I just found these books like very easy to binge. They were like super fun. They're all on Kindle Unlimited. If you want to read them through there, I feel like they would be super easy to just fly through. Like I said, I did audio and they were just like really easy to listen to. I think the first book I gave 3 stars, the second one 3.5, and the last one 4. So I sort of kept liking them more and more as the series went on. I also think the plots sort of got better as the books went on. But yeah, that was Wrath of the Fae. It was fun, it was easy. If you have Kindle Unlimited and you want something short to get through, I would recommend. And then, time to talk about the one non-fiction book I read for the month. Like I said, I don't usually read non-fiction. I think the last 2 years I've literally read one each year, and it was, both times it was a memoir. And this one was actually a self-help book, which I never saw myself reading, but 2 of my friends heavily recommended it, and I was like, okay, fine. So the book is The Let Them Theory, and I listened to the audiobook of it because the author is like a motivational speaker, and she also has a podcast and stuff, and she was narrating the book, so she did a really good job of like getting it out and emphasizing the right parts and all of that. So I would definitely recommend the audio if you're interested. I feel like I'm not like smart enough to really talk a lot about a self-help book, but I will say I did enjoy this one. I think I gave it 4 stars. I enjoyed it way more than I was expecting to. It didn't feel too like self-helpy. Like I'm just not really a self-help book girl. Probably never will be. I much prefer my fiction, but I thought this one was really good at basically just talking about like focusing on what's in your control and letting go of what's out of your control. And like rather than like fixating on all the things that are wrong that you can't control, just saying like, let them do that thing and let me focus on what I need to focus on to get where I want. That is a very, very brief description of it. There's like way more in the book, but yeah, I really liked it. I don't think a lot of the concepts were like groundbreaking concepts. Like I've never heard this idea before. I think it was just maybe that there was a lot of good concepts that I liked that were sort of put into one book. And yeah, I thought it was good, and I would recommend, if you're interested, definitely listen to the audiobook. Yeah, that's all I have to say. I really don't know how to review a self-help book, so that's all I'm gonna say. On to the romance. So the first romance that I read this month was The Romantic Tragedies of a Drama King by Harry Trevaldwin. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, but he is a comedian and actor. This is like a YA romantic comedy book. We're following our main character as he's starting the new school year, and he's like this very, very confident drama kid, and he's decided that this year it's his mission to find a boyfriend. And so we're just following him along in drama class, doing this play with his friends, with some like romance. That's sort of the vibe of the book. And I am very hit or miss with young adult romances because a lot of the time I find the main character like quite annoying, probably because they're like accurately being portrayed as a teenager. But this one I loved, and I did see some reviews that said like he was so annoying. And you know what, like I can see how they thought he was annoying, but like I don't even care. I literally loved him so much. This book was so funny. It was genuinely one of the funniest books I think I've ever read in my life. And going into it, I didn't know who the author was, and then I looked him up and it said like he's a comedian, and I was like, this makes sense, because it was seriously so funny. Like I was laughing out loud multiple times throughout the book. This ended up being a 5-star for me. I also switched over partway through to the audiobook because I realized the author narrated it, and obviously he's an actor, so he's very good with like the voices and stuff like that. And the audiobook was so good. So I would also highly recommend the audiobook for this one because it was hilarious. I genuinely loved this so, so much. So definitely give it a go if you're curious. It was just the most fun time I have had reading a book. The next book that I'll talk about is a novella, and that is The Fall Risk by Abby Jimenez. So I love Abby Jimenez. I think I have mentioned her in nearly every video I've literally ever posted. But she released like a short little novella that was like, I don't know, 70 pages or something. It's basically this short little story about these two neighbors who live across from each other, and they get stuck at their apartment for the weekend, and you sort of find out why, and they basically just like hang out and get along, and it was just really cute. There was also quite like a serious tone to part of the plot. It was a good time. I just love Abby Jimenez's writing, and she really manages to make you fall in love with characters even in a really short space of time. So if you have a short amount of time and you want like a little romance pick-me-up, I would definitely suggest. Okay, so the next book is Iced Out by Veronica Eden, and this is a college hockey romance, and I have these beautiful sprayed glittery edges from Books Ever After, which is a romance bookstore in Australia. And this one was really cute. It was like a very easy, bingeable sports romance. Like the plot was fun, the characters were fun, they had some fun banter. It didn't like wow me by any means. Like it wasn't the best hockey romance I've ever read, but like it was fun and easy and short and like pass the time, if that makes sense. I think I gave it like, if you're curious, I would check it out. It did feel like there was a lot of spice in this for like how short the book was, and I just felt like it was like a little bit too much, that it was really taking away from like having a plot. Like I would be listening to it and then it was like, and there's another scene and I was just like, this is too much for what the book is. Like I want to find out what's going on with the characters. So that would probably be my main critique. But if you are into that, then you go for it. You will have a great time with this book. Next we have Here We Go Again. This is the author of Kiss Her Once for Me and Charm Offensive, which are two books that I gave 5 stars. I read them both maybe a year and a half or 2 years ago now, but I loved them when I read them, so I was really, really excited for this. I had seen some mixed reviews, and even when I went to check Goodreads, like after I read it, I saw some mixed reviews, but for me, I loved this so much, and it was another 5-star read from this author. I don't think I liked it as much as The Charm Offensive, but I genuinely like finished it, and I think I gave it a 4.5, and then I like could not stop thinking about it for days, and every time I would think of it, like I would just like contemplate it for a really long time. So that was my sign that it was a 5-star. I loved it. So in this book, we are following our 2 main characters who grew up together in this small town. They used to be like best friends, and now they like hate each other, and they sort of had this like parental figure as they were growing up who really like looked after them their whole childhood and into adulthood, and they still keep in contact with him. And basically he pulls them both in together and he says, so I'm dying and I really want to go on this road trip across the country and I want you two to come. They're both like, okay, well, this is awful. I don't want to do this for you because you're our like parental figure, but I don't want to hang out with this other person because I hate them. But then they end up going and they rekindle their friendship and maybe something more along the road trip. And this is like the trope of like one person who is like super disorganized and like chaotic, and compared to someone who is like super organized and like on top of everything and like a big planner. And I don't know why, but I love that trope so much. Like I always find it so funny. I feel like the banter is always really good. And yeah, I just love that. I will say this book is really sad. Like it had me crying. Like from the premise, you can tell it's sad, and like it really was sad. So I wouldn't say this is like a happy-go-lucky rom-com. Her writing is really like fun and the characters are really funny and they have lots of banter and like that is really fun, but the tone of the book genuinely is just quite sad. Whereas like her other book, The Charm Offensive, like it's just a fun, it's like a more serious theme, but it sort of like adds a little bit to the book without overpowering it. This one just felt really a lot. I think it was executed so well that even though I really hate sad books, I still enjoyed it. And like for our main characters, for the romance, there's a happily ever after, of course, because it's a romance book. But yeah, for like the sort of subplot, which is quite a huge plot, it was really sad. So please keep that in mind, because this one had me sobbing and sad for a while. But it was written so beautifully. Like I said, there was really good like banter and funny moments, but the more serious plot line was just written so well. I felt so attached to all these characters. I was genuinely so heartbroken at so many points in this book. It was, yeah, it was really sad, but it was really good. So yeah, I really love this book. 5 stars, broke my heart. Okay, and next we have Deep End by Ali Hazelwood, a highly anticipated read for so many people, I am sure. This is her latest release that came out in February. It's a college like sports romance between a diver and a swimmer. And I didn't actually realize, but it also is still like a STEM romance, like Love Hypothesis, Love Theoretically, like those ones. I thought it was just sports romance, and you actually get cameo from Olive and Adam in this, which I loved. They're from the Love Hypothesis. This book I was nervous going into because I loved her first few releases, like her first 3 books she released, but I hated Not in Love that came out last year. Like, I was just like, is this the same author? Like, I cannot stand this book. I hate everything about it. Yeah, so I was scared going into this book, but I ended up enjoying it a lot more than I thought. I really liked our main characters in this book. I thought they were really funny, and they had like a really good connection. Like, it reminded me a lot more of her older books in like their banter and how the romance was sort of like built up slowly across the book. Like, it was really fun. So I really liked that. The plot was also really fun. Like, you had the sort of sports element of it with the diving and the swimming, and then you also had the STEM part of it as well, and like it was just really interesting to read about, so I loved that. What I didn't love so much, I didn't love the whole, I feel like I can't say too much without spoiling it, but the whole plot line with the friend, especially how it sort of happened towards the end. I don't know why, but it really kind of put me off a little bit and made me feel like a bit about the story, and so I ended up like knocking down the rating like a tiny bit because I was feeling picky about it. I also found some parts just like a little bit cringy, shall we say. But overall, I liked it. I wouldn't say I like it as much as like Love Hypothesis, Love Theoretically, but definitely more than like some of her more recent releases. And then the last book for the month is Bad Publicity by Bianca Gilliam. This is a debut author, I am pretty sure. It's a rom-com following a book publisher and an author, and basically the book publisher starts at this new job and she's really excited, and then she finds out the author she's going to be working with is like her old nemesis from university, and she's meant to go on like a month-long book tour with him. And so it's got like sort of enemies to lovers, and yeah, this one was very interesting to me. So the romance in this kind of took the back seat, I would say. I wouldn't say this was like a strong romance. It was almost more of like women's fiction with like a romance subplot, which is kind of a big critique that I've seen of it for the people who have read it. I didn't mind that, and I kind of knew that going in, and I still really enjoyed the romance because it was sort of slower burn and paced out throughout the book. I really enjoyed it. I found the characters had like really good banter, and like it was really funny, all their interactions. But aside from the romance, the main theme of this book was grief. Our main character is dealing with a lot of grief that she's neglected for years and she hasn't processed, and you can really see the way that processing that emotion has like impacted her in her friendships and her relationships with like her family and friends and romantically and all of that, and the way that it's really impacted her life to this day, even for something that happened like years ago. And I really loved this storyline. Once again, I don't love reading sad books, and this book was definitely sad because the theme of grief was very prominent and strong in it, but I found it was really well written and really well executed. I just like absolutely loved it, and it had me like tearing up towards the end. I also saw people say in their reviews that like they found the main character annoying and petty and whatnot, and like I could see she was being petty about things, but I was like, first of all, it's kind of funny, but second of all, as the book got further in, I feel like I could like see why she was being so like petty and about things and like didn't want to talk about anything. Like there was miscommunication because of that, but like as you get in, because it explored the themes that it did so well, you could really like, it was almost like a character study in understanding why she was acting like that, and sort of made me feel more like empathy towards her and understanding than like annoyance, if that makes sense. So yeah, overall, this was an interesting one. If you are intrigued, I would highly recommend picking it up. I will say, when I checked Goodreads, when I checked like my friends who have read this, the reviews were not like super high, and I'm like really sad by that, because I just think maybe it's been like marketed wrong as this like really fun enemies to lovers romance, and it does have that, but it's just not the main plotline. Like it really is like a character study of someone exploring grief, and there's like a subplot of a romance. So I would recommend reading this, but know what you're getting into when you're reading it. I really, really liked this, and I'm really glad that I read it. It was different to what I was expecting, but yeah, I thought it was written really well, and I'm really excited to read the author's next books as well. Okay, we have reached the end of this month's reading wrap up. I hope that it was fun to watch. I love talking about the books I've read in the month, even though I'm really bad at remembering like what happened. But you can tell the ones I like because I remember more of what happened, even though in every single book I read, I will forget the characters' names immediately. Thank you so much for watching and listening to me yap about books for ages. And I will see you in the next video. Bye!
I'm looking for a